Okay, I think everyone's here. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I don't know where exactly the participants are, so I'll just say everything. My name is Jay De Jesus. I am currently the Asia organizer for World Beyond War. So just before we started, just a few Zoom logistics, everyone. So today's event will run for from 1 to somewhere around 1.5 hours. We will be recording today's event, and we so that we can send out a post-event email after the webinar with a link to the recording and hopefully with the materials that the speakers will be using today. Please use the chat throughout the event to post comments, questions, especially later for our question and answer portion. And if you haven't yet, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and just say where you're tuning in from. You can say your name, your organization, if you belong to any, and the country. Oh, if you can include as well your email address. Thank you. So, without further ado, I'll pass it on to Annette Brownlee from IPAN and PPM. Annette.
Thanks very much, Jay, and welcome everyone. I'm coming to you from Nipaluna, otherwise known as Hobart in Tasmania, and I'd like to pay my respects to the Aboriginal peoples on whose land I'm coming to you from for their survival and continuing connection with the land spanning more than 40,000 years. The Pacific Peace Network, just a little brief introduction, aims to work with Pacifica people to call for independence from colonial powers and plan for each country to hold purely defence forces, to have a nuclear-free Pacific free from foreign countries' nuclear-powered or armed vessels, to enhance cooperative relationships amongst us in the Pacific, addressing climate change, education for our people, and healthy, well-resourced communities. And we work for across the Pacific bond for an ocean of peace. So today, each presenter will only speak, as has been said, 5 minutes only, and we will generally have questions and discussions at the end. However, our first speaker can only stay for the first 10-15 minutes. So in that case, we will, if you have any questions to put to David, please put those in the chat as he's speaking. So welcoming our first speaker, who is Australian Greens Senator David Shoebridge. David is the spokesperson for Defence and Foreign Affairs, and he has been a prominent media voice warning of against Australia's involvement in US wars and advocating for an independent foreign and defence policy. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Annette. And look, I'm really grateful that the Pacific Network is here and we're coming together to talk about peace and a redirection for the planet. I can't think of a better subject or a more critical time for us to be doing it. I'm on Gadigal land in the eastern part of Sydney, and I want to pay my respects to those First Nations elders past, present, for this pretty magical part of the world that I live in. And to acknowledge that, when we're talking peace, my country, my home of Australia has so much to do to have peace with First Nations peoples on our own shores. I suppose maybe I'll just give a little insight into what the Australian government has been doing at this time. I'm a Greens Senator. I'm obviously not a member of the government. I'd probably call myself one of the members of one of the only non-war parties in the Australian Parliament. Our Parliament is dominated by two large parties and one party on the right that is getting growing support. We have the Labor Party, which is in government, the Coalition, which is the notional Conservative opposition, and then a far-right racist One Nation party. All three of those parties back the current illegal war. And rather bizarrely, the debate we had in the federal parliament between those parties happened early last week. And the debate that they had was whether or not they supported a motion to congratulate Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu for beginning the war, or just to support the war that they had started. That was the nature of the debate between those parties. As a Greens senator, we have been openly condemning this war. We recognise it's grossly illegal at international law, and it highlights just how dangerous our relationship with the United States is. So what has Australia been doing? Well, Australia, to its shame, was one of the first countries to, I think the first country to publicly support Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump's illegal war. The rationale that the Australian government has been using has sort of cycled through concepts such as the regime in Iran is bad and therefore we should support a war on it, which is a concept unknown to international law and a remarkably reckless and dangerous approach. To the Australian government supports the United States and Israel in removing the imminent nuclear threat that Iran has. That's the language they've used. Of course, there is no imminent nuclear threat. The International Atomic Energy Agency has made it clear. Donald Trump, I think, said only a bare days before the war started that he'd obliterated the Iranian nuclear threat. The other argument that's been used was that Australia supports the Iranian people to overthrow their regime. That's used in different formulas by the Australian government, by the coalition, by One Nation. We've seen what a specious and false argument that has been, and how even in the last 24 to 48 hours, even Donald Trump, well, currently is moving away from that. He may come back to that. So not only did Australian government support the war, they were been silent about the missile attack that destroyed an Iranian girls' school. Silent about the disastrous impacts that are happening on the ground in Iran, the ecological disasters, the 1,000+ Iranians that have been killed. They have been silent about Israel's aggressive war in Lebanon, even though tens of thousands of Australians live in Lebanon at the moment and are being directly threatened by the obscene escalation of the war. And the Lebanese diaspora in Australia, there's about 250,000, maybe more, Australians who are proud of and celebrate their Lebanese heritage and their connections and family. Silence from our government. It seems that from the Australian government perspective, if you're being targeted by Israeli or US missiles and bombs, then you don't exist for the purposes of the Australian government. I think we're seeing much of that being the sort of tenor of Western governments, that if you're being killed by Israeli or US bombs and missiles, then you deserve it. You're a worthy target. It's entirely appropriate. But if you are being attacked by Iranian missiles or bombs, well, then it's a human rights catastrophe. And the Australian government has deployed military assets into the region. They have joined the war. They've sent an AWAC sort of air. It's called a wedge tail, but it's effectively an aerial surveillance aircraft that can detect incoming threats and it can direct outgoing missiles and bomb strikes. It's just been seamlessly integrated into the US military flying over the United Arab Emirates. We're sending missiles and support personnel into that. That military deployment is just going to neatly fit into the US military deployment there. All of Australia's military is designed to be interoperable with the United States military. We send that AWAC in, that frees up other US assets to be used to target Iran. And that Australian military asset will also be identifying where missiles and drones originate from and feeding that targeting information into the United States. Australia has troops embedded throughout the US military. And I'm sure we all remember the shameful sinking of the Iranian frigate in the Indian Ocean after it had been at a friendship visit in India.
Time is up.
And there were 3 Australian sailors on board that United States nuclear submarine when it sank the frigate, and then not only sinking the frigate, abandoned the drowning crew to die in the Indian Ocean in breach of the Geneva Conventions. The official line from the Australian government is that all the 3 Australian soldiers went to their bedrooms when that happened and therefore weren't part of the attack. I mean, it's a specious false argument. Australia, of course, also is integrated into the US war making in Pine Gap and Northwest Cape, and we're also part of sending parts into US weapons platforms that are being fed into this war, both to the United States and Israel. It's a pretty obscene approach taken by our government. When our foreign minister was asked openly in the Senate, is Australia at war? She simply couldn't answer the question. Like literally 2 minutes of non-answers of the question. I think there's no question Australia is at war. We're part of another illegal US forever war in the Middle East. And I can tell you now the Australian public is revolted by it. There is a small cheer squad on the far right. But my reading of the Australian public is they don't want us anywhere near another US forever war. They're frightened by Donald Trump. They're frightened by what is happening. They're beginning to feel the economic impacts of this war with fuel prices rising, fuel scarcity happening. And our job in the peace movement has never been more important. So thanks everyone for speaking out. And I just apologise to all our Pacific neighbours for the approach that Australia has taken and about how our government is captured by these war parties. We promise to do everything we can here in Australia to try and recover our government from these war parties, to try and make Australia a force for peace in our region and in the world. But at the moment, we're not. At the moment, we are shamefully adding our political support, our military support, our economic support to another illegal war in the Middle East. And I'm sorry I can't stay with you. I'm going out to catch up with community and speak about this in Western Sydney. And I'll be travelling around the country in the next few days to speak about peace and a different direction. But yes, thank you
very much, David. That's very, very good to get that synopsis of just how shameful our government in Australia is behaving. So we do have a question for you before you go. Does the notion of Australian neutrality have any traction across parties in Parliament that can be built on?
No, there's no interest inside the Labor Party or the Coalition or One Nation for neutrality. Literally, we're the only party in there advocating for peace and non-violence and to extract ourselves. But amongst the population, the difference in the conversation that's happening at Parliament, which is all about, as I said, the argument was, should we congratulate or support the war? Between the conversations you have amongst family and community workmates and now on the street is astounding. And I think that is delegitimizing the government, the opposition, and One Nation. Literally, we talk about them as the war parties, and the public hates it. So, I think this is a moment the peace movement has to build on, and we should not pretend that any one of those three parties is going to be a partner in peace. We actually have to remove them from power, I think.
Yeah, agree. And there's another question. What do you think are the best mechanisms? But I think you've just answered that, and that is working to make sure that they don't get re-elected. But it's also about, and I'm sure you'd agree, it's about presenting real alternatives to the people in the community. And I guess that applies for, for all of us here at this gathering. So
people are hungry for that, Annette. They're hungry for what Australia's role could be, apart from just being a sort of sub-imperial power to the United States. And when we articulate what that role should be, that Australia should not buy nuclear submarines to project power. We should disengage ourselves from the United States, and we should have a military designed to defend Australia, but not threaten our neighbours. And maybe start a bloody good trend in the region where everyone's military is designed to defend themselves, but not to threaten their neighbours. And we have a de-escalation in our region and a peaceful Pacific. People, when they hear that, and they say, well, what do you mean? And you say, well, those of you, I'm sorry if you're not familiar with Australian native wildlife, we have these lovely little creatures called echidnas, which are the most harmless and beautiful little creatures, but they're spiky as all get out. And if you approach them, they hunker down and they're very spiky. But most of the time they just go peacefully about their business eating ants. We talk about an echidna strategy for Australia. We're spiky, we defend ourselves, but, unless you're an ant, we're pretty bloody friendly.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And you've more or less answered one of the other questions is how much does the AUKUS agreement have to do with our involvement in war? And of course, it is integral. It's a manifestation of the dangerous alliance that we have with the United States. But do you want to add anything to that, David?
Well, tonight I'll be in the northern part of Sydney, in Pennant Hills, running with a number of our local groups and advocates on the ground an anti-AUKUS rally forum. We'll be talking with our friends in the Australia Institute. If people haven't been following the work of Emma Shortis, Dr. Emma Shortis at the Australia Institute. She is a terrific advocate for a different approach for Australia, a peaceful approach to extract ourselves from AUKUS. I'll be doing an event with her. I actually think that there is this is it's awful to think about a war as anything other than something we resist because of the horrors on the ground. And of course, that's why we resist war more broadly. But this is a moment where people's eyes are being opened, like the appalling genocide in Gaza, I think opened many people's eyes to the way the world works. And if you're in Australia and you want to organise an anti-AUKUS rally or a peace forum, please feel free to reach out to our office. If I can't be there, I'll see if other members of our party around the country can be there and help you, because we won't win it all in Parliament. We're going to win it out on the streets. We're going to win it in town hall rallies. We're going to win in chats we have people have at their workplace. So we're happy to be a part of all of that.
Fantastic. And thank you once again for making the time to be here with us today. And we look forward to further opportunities to work with you and the Australian Greens, along with IPAN in Australia. So thanks, David.
Thanks, and sorry I've got to run. I would have loved to stay. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Our next speaker is from Jeju Island in South Korea. Sung-hee Choi has been joining the struggle against the Jeju Navy base for the last 15 years. She is a stalwart, an amazing activist, and has been a member of people making Jeju a demilitarized peace island, inter-island solidarity for the peace of the sea, and people opposing militarization and rocket launches. Welcome, Sung-hee.
Hello, my name is Choi Sung-hee. Please let me share my PPT. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, that's
Yes,
all
we
good.
can. You can just make it
Okay.
full screen.
Yes, okay. The photo shows peace activists from Gangjang village in early March, standing in front of the main gate of the Jeju naval base, demanding an end to the United States and Israeli invasion of Iran. We are also deeply concerned that Jeju, home to the Jeju naval base, a forward outpost of U.S. imperialism, and South Korea, which is thoroughly subordinate to the United States through U.S.-South Korea alliance, might become entangled in this unjust war. Since the base was completed in 2016, many United States Aegis destroyers have docked there. Above all, the base has been the home port for the South Korean Cheonghae unit, which has been deployed to the West Asia region since 2009. Currently, a single naval destroyer is operating in the nearby Gulf of Aden off the coast of Somalia, and this destroyer can be rapidly deployed to the Strait of Hormuz within a matter of days. Although the Cheonghae unit is said to be deployed to protect South Korean merchant ships, it could be mobilized to support to U.S. military operations depending on the situation. And we strongly oppose Jeju becoming entangled in war as its result. This war makes it abundantly clear how urgent it is to shut down the Jeju naval base and demilitarize Jeju. THAAD, THAAD, which is a component of a U.S. missile defense system, the THAAD launchers from the United States Forces Korea, mainland of South Korea, were transported to the West Asian region after the war. Although the United States and South Korean governments have claimed the THAAD system are intended for the defense against North Korea, this incident has made it clear that they are not for the defense against North Korea, but rather for the sake of U.S. global hegemony. Many South Koreans are concerned that the U.S. military bases in South Korea could drag the country into an unwanted war at any moment. On February 18th, without consulting the South Korean government. The United States Forces Korea sent about 10 fighter jets into the middle of China's air defense identification zone, prompting Chinese fighter jets to scramble and leading to a standoff. South Korean peace activists strongly denounced the USFK, which threatens peace on the Korean Peninsula and around the world. Above all, the South Korean government has exported South Korean-made weapons worth over 300 billion won to Israel, weapons that have been used in the massacre of Palestinians and an invasion of Iran. Furthermore, it has refrained from condemning the aggressor nations, the United States and Israel. This amounts to nothing less than complicity in this unjust war. And leading South Korean defense contractors, such as Hana, they are growing their stock prices and gaining more opportunities for arms exports. Unfortunately, the Jeju government is granting preferential treatment to the defense contractor like Hanwha, and Hanwha System is seeking to establish a complete space industry cycle in Jeju, encompassing satellite manufacturing, launch, and satellite services. This afternoon today, Jeju residents, including me, will hold a joint rally in Jeju City to demand that the United States and Israel immediately cease their war against Iran, that the South Korean government condemn the illegal aggression by the United States and Israel, that the Jeju naval base be closed and the militarization of Jeju halted, and that the Jeju provincial government cease its cooperation with the weapon manufacturer like Hanwha, and will call for solidarity among the world's people to put an end to imperialism and war. Lastly, these photos show various protests that have taken place mostly in Seoul recently on two separate occasions. Citizens marched from the Israeli embassy to the U.S. embassy to condemn the United States and Israeli war against Iran and to
Sung-hee,
move.
please wrap up.
Let us put an end to imperialism and war through the solidarity of the world's people. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Yeah.
Annette, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. Big thank you, Sung-hee. You're amazing. The people in Jeju and South Korea are incredible. The way you can bring your protests together with such wonderful signage and everything else that you do. So we will have questions to each of the speakers after we go through the list. If you can just put your questions in the chat, please. All right, our next speaker today is Eugene Doyle. Eugene's from Aotearoa. That is New Zealand, and he is a writer and member of Just Defence, a Wellington-based defence policy group. And that group is calling on the government to freeze spending on defence and urgently reassess Aotearoa's place in a rapidly changing world. Thank you, Eugene.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou katoa. Ka nui te mihi a koutou katoa. Yes, I'm Eugene Doyle from Te Whanganui Atara, from Wellington, way down in the South Pacific. Yes, and I loved what all the speakers were saying. I'd sum it up as saying we must be stopped because unfortunately our governments, with few exceptions here, are participants in this absolutely terrible horror that we're witnessing. David mentioned the children killed in Manab, 168 of them, I believe. Now, I've been to Iran a couple of times, and I've I remember a day in particular where my wife and I, we had just such a lovely day with a whole bunch of beautiful school kids and their teachers. And I think it's that kind of experience where you see people as people, and some of the people we talked to were pro-regime and some of the people we talked to were anti-regime or government, I should more correctly say. But the Iranian people are wonderful people, and they most certainly don't need to be attacked by vicious imperial powers like our own. And of course, I'm my entire life, my government has tended to line up on the side of really brutal imperial force like the United States, the greatest killer of men, women, and children in foreign lands in all the years since the Second World War. Now, getting into my own country, we haven't yet seen a major mobilization. We've seen some minor protests against the attack on Iran, and we obviously want to work to actually mobilize a lot more people, and that means trying to get people out of this ambivalent idea that, well, I don't particularly like the Iranian government. And the point here is you don't have to like the government of Iran to oppose this illegal war. And I think we've got to try to really elevate the status of the United Nations Charter, which is it's a great document. It's the prohibition of force, the sovereign equality of nations, and really elevate that. And I think something that's actually getting people, I've noticed people being quite interested by this one here in New Zealand, people who I'm used to being quite sort of sitting on the sideline. And I think it's because economics is starting to play a bigger part in all of this. And I've been warning about this for quite some time, that if the US and Israel attack Iran, then the cozy world of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, etc., could easily be swept up in an economic catastrophe. That's something I wrote some time ago, and we are starting to see that right now. And I personally respect the right of the state of Iran to fight back against this aggression, and I have to be quite frank and say I hope the US and Israel are defeated. So, as I said, there's a couple of things that will turn this from a geopolitical story that you look about in the newspaper or whatever. So it'll change from a geopolitical story to a kitchen table issue. And countries like New Zealand, I think, are very soon going to find out that our splendid isolation is not so splendid anymore, and that there are prices that comes with being a loyal vassal to the American empire. Here in New Zealand, we've got about 4 weeks oil left, and about another three weeks on tankers that are supposed to come our way. But I mean, I noticed today some tankers were heading to Spain and they got turned around because somebody else paid a lot more money for the oil. I noticed little things like Air New Zealand. We're a small country. The Air New Zealand just cancelled 40,000 booked seats. So we're starting to see real world impacts. And New Zealand is an agricultural country. We get, most people don't know this, most farmers wouldn't know this, 63% of our urea, our high nitrogen crop fertilizers, 63% of it comes from Saudi Arabia alone. So I think we'll start to see these effects sort of hitting home. And we'll start asking, do we really want our government to be involved in this? And I think any signal that the New Zealand government is going to play any role whatsoever in this totally illegal and completely immoral attack on Iran, I think that's possibly something that will help us get more people out on the street, mobilize people. I was pleased to see today that Italy, Prime Minister Meloni has said that Italy will not support this war. Of course, we know Spain will not support this war. So we want to see more Western countries standing up and opposing this war. I'll give us a shout out, by the way, if I'm running out of time. I guess what I'd say is, thinking about the messaging of this, how to mobilize people. And I think it's really important that we focus on international law, the prohibition of force, the sovereign equality. We also expose the racism and the hypocrisy that's at the heart of this. Yes, that's really the messages that I'd like to reinforce, and I'd welcome any ideas you have as to how we can do a better job at getting people out on the street. So, nō reira hoa mā, ka nui te mihi koutou katoa.
Well, that is the challenge. Thanks so much, Eugene, for that perspective from New Zealand. Okay, we'll now hear from Anne Wright, and most of you will know Anne. Anne is a 29-year colonel, now retired, from the U.S. Army, who retired as from that position and in opposition to the Iraq War in 2003. Let's hear from Anne. You there, Anne? There you are. You need to unmute.
Okay, I'm ready now. Thank you. First, apologies from U.S. citizens for what our country is doing yet one more time, another war. I'm here in what should be the sovereign country of Hawaii, but it is the annexed state of Hawaii. The sovereignty of Hawaii has been compromised, of course, by the U.S. and other places. I'm going to share my little screen right now and talk about a couple of things, the economic impacts of this horrible war. I mean, I'm not going to go through the litany of everything the U.S. has done and Israel has done. I think you all have seen it all on TV. It's horrible, it's terrible, and it's got to stop. But some of the impacts we're talking about, fuel prices going up here in Hawaii, they're supposed to go up at least, 50 cents. I think it'll probably be $5. Fewer tourists that are coming because the airlines are having to charge more for the tickets because the fuel costs more. Delays in shipping for all of us that are out in the Pacific, where virtually everything we get has to be brought in. The shipping lines are having difficulties, fuel shortages. The inflation in daily life is starting to creep up, and affordability. So those are some of the impacts that I think all of us are feeling from this horrible war. But what I really want to talk about are what are going to be the blowbacks that we should anticipate here in the United States, that there are going to be blowbacks against the United States government, against the people of the United States for starting yet one more war. And here in Hawaii, interestingly enough, we are already part of that war. As David mentioned, there was a Iranian frigate, the Iris Dina, that was torpedoed by the United States, torpedoed off Sri Lanka, 22 miles off Sri Lanka. And as you can see, it's a long way from Sri Lanka all the way up to Iran and those places. And it was sunk by a U.S. submarine from Hawaii. And people don't forget that. I mean, where do these submarines come from? And there were a couple of Australians that are apparently on training missions with this submarine, that had an unarmed submarine that was coming back from a regional military exercise that India had organized, similar to what we have in Hawaii on the summer, the Rim of the Pacific exercises, the RIMPAC exercises. And that's what this unarmed Navy frigate was coming back from, and the United States of America blew it up. And there were, we don't know for sure how many were killed, but 32 were picked up, 87 we think is the maximum number. There were 74 countries that had participated in this regional exercise, including some people from the United States Air Force, and a general was a part of it. So they even knew what was going on, and they didn't alert anyone. This is a flat murder. And it's not the first time, of course, here are all the submarines. We have 13 fast attack submarines here in Hawaii alone. And that's why I'm saying I think we in Hawaii ought to be ready for some blowback. And we in the Pacific ought to be ready for some blowback, even though we think we're far, far away. And one of the things I want to mention is that the Tomahawk missile that killed those schoolgirls in Iran could have been killed by a U.S. submarine. These submarines have Tomahawk weapons. That hasn't come out in the papers yet. We don't know for sure who launched that missile, but whoever it was, it's going to be remembered. Who did all this killing? Who killed all of these people at that girls' school? And here we have some protests. This is not one that we've had yet on the war on Iran. The one we were going to have yesterday got canceled because we've got bad weather here, but we'll be having one next week. We'll go to the headquarters of the U.S. Pacific Fleet that handles all of these submarines and frigates, and we'll have not only land back, shut down Red Hill, we don't trust the military, and get the hell out of the war on Iran. And just to be bring history, here at Pearl Harbor, we have another submarine that's on display to the world. It's called the USS Bowfin. The Bowfin killed people too. In 1944, toward the end of the war, it blew up a passenger ship coming out of Okinawa with 1,800 people on it. There were 800 children that were on it, school kids, only 59 were survived on that. So the U.S. military, of course, as we well know, has a real history. But I wanted to just bring it home here to Hawaii, and then mention one other thing that every Iranian knows about. In 1988, the United States Navy again shot down an Iranian airliner, Flight 655. And it was during the Iraq-Iran war. Of course, the United States was giving Iraq chemical weapons that were being used against the Iranians. But here you have something that every Iranian remembers. And we know that because 7 years ago, we were with a delegation of Code Pink Women for Peace that were at the Peace Museum in Tehran, Iran. And that display about the flight of 655 was one of the most heartbreaking things. And of course, we as U.S. citizens made our deepest apologies to the Iranians that run the Peace Museum there. We don't know whether the Peace Museum is still standing. It would not be out of the realm of possibility that the U.S. military has targeted something called a Peace Museum. So with that, and blowback, okay? Here in the United States, yesterday, we have an example of the blowback. And here we have a fellow from Lebanon he's Lebanese American. 3 or 4 of his family members were killed by the Israeli strikes in Lebanon, and he drove his car into a Jewish synagogue. And we don't know what he was going to do. I mean, it wasn't anything good for sure, but in the anger that's coming from everyone who's been affected by this. So the blowback is already starting to happen. So with that, I will thank you all very, very much for being with us today. And again, our apologies as citizens of the United States that our country continues its warmongering around the world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Anne. As always, a very important a compilation of facts that relate to this situation, and your slides. I think it would be great if you can make those available. There's really good information in those slides that we can all use in the different parts of the Pacific where we are building opposition to this. Yeah. And our next speaker, Cora Fabros from the Philippines. Cora is co-president of the International Peace Bureau and a member of the Thematic Circle on Peace and Security at the Asia-Europe People's Forum. She's also a member of the Steering Committee of Dismantle Military Industries Complex Network. Thank you, Cora, for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you, Annette, and good morning, good day to everyone, wherever you are located. It's really great to see many familiar faces for a long while. So let me just begin. We have a very limited time at this point. And when we think about this war that's happening on Iran, it is often discussed as a distant geopolitical crisis. But for millions of people in Southeast Asia, especially for the Philippines, this war is not distant at all. No, it has direct consequences to our security, our economy, and of course, our lives. There are three areas that I intend to speak about. First, about Philippines increasingly being pulled into the military schedules projects of the United States, not only in the region, but globally. Second, it will be about the consequences for our overseas Filipino workers, where we have about 2.3 million overseas Filipino workers in that region in the Middle East. And of course, the third item would be on the deeper economic instability across Southeast Asia and the Philippines as a consequence of this current war. First, the Philippines, I would say, is increasingly being pulled into the military architecture of the United States. This is not new. This is a continuing thing, but this is also there is also an alarming increase in this particular role for the Philippines. Our country now hosts 9 military locations under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States, where U.S. forces can rotate troops, reposition weapons, and infrastructure, and use our territory for military operations. These sites are linked to a wider web of alliances, of course, with Japan, with Australia, especially South Korea, and some NATO partners, and forming a strategic military network across the Indo-Pacific region. This means that in the widening conflict involving the United States, whether in the Middle East or in East Asia, the Philippines risk being drawn into wars that are not of our own choosing. Let us be clear then, when foreign war infrastructure is built on our soil, our people inherit the risk and consequences to lives of people, to our environment, to our economy, and to our sovereignty as a nation. Second, the war threatens the safety of Filipino migrant workers. Millions of Filipinos work overseas, and large numbers are in the Middle East. Rough count at this point, including their families, are something like 2.3 million overseas Filipino workers. They're mostly located in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, Kuwait, Qatar, and nearby areas, including Iran, of course. These workers sustain the Philippine economy through remittances that keep families alive, send children to school, and support communities across the country. But when war erupts, they become the most vulnerable of all. Flights are, canceled, as what is happening currently. Borders close as well, and jobs disappear. And so families panic, both those who are in the area and for the families that are left behind in the Philippines. For decades, the Philippine economy relied on labor and sacrifice of migrant workers. Now, those same workers are exposed to the dangers of geopolitical conflict. The third consequence would be this current war will deepen economic instability across Southeast Asia, not only the Philippines. Conflict in that region threatens global energy supplies and shipping routes. Higher oil prices mean higher food prices and higher transport costs and deeper hardship for already struggling populations. For the Philippines alone, price of gasoline has been doubled, almost doubled. So it is not just about geopolitics, it is about the daily survival of ordinary people. This is why we speak directly and urgently. And I've listed several demands, of course, the end to this and demand our Philippine government to stay away from, allowing the use of Philippine territory for the ongoing war in Iran.
Thank you
The Philippines must not become a launching pad for war, and it should not become a battlefield for great powers. Our people deserve jobs, dignity, and peace, not bases, missiles, and endless conflict. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Cora. You've really put it all together. And I think the migrant workers issue is a really big one. There's talk of flights being cancelled due to the impacts of aircraft fuel supplies being at risk. I think this is incredibly destabilizing for so many people throughout the world, but in particular people throughout the Pacific and Southeast Asia. Yeah, so thank you again, Cora. Our last speaker today is Rachel Clark, and Rachel is a Japanese American who lives in New York. She works closely with Veterans for Peace and is the coordinator for an annual U.S. veteran to speak to many audiences in Japan. She's worked closely with the Japanese Peace Boat and in the New York City office. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. Well, I am a lifetime member of Veterans for Peace, and I live in a so-called upstate New York in a small community, which is a stolen land from one of Mohawk tribes. I am one of the beneficiaries of stolen natural resources of indigenous people, stolen oil from Syria, Iraq, and Venezuela, and probably many more. The last 10 years, I've been organizing peace speaking tour in Japan, and from 2023, we extended to Okinawa. And what we've been witnessing is just a remilitarization, huge and speedy scale of remilitarization of Japan. Originally, 2015, I was one of the 10 delegations together with Anne Wright to Okinawa. And already at that time, Okinawa was a huge turmoil against construction of new U.S. Marine Corps Air Base, Henoko, which was supposedly one of the twin sisters with U.S. Navy base of Jeju Island. And simultaneously, around that time, there are small islands off the coast of Okinawa. Between Okinawa Island and Taiwan, those tiny islands were already militarized. So starting from 2023, we started visiting those tiny islands. All of them are like a treasure chest of natural beauty. Clean air, clean ocean, very rare species, but now they have filled with the military bases, of self-defense forces of Japan. And U.S. military bases, number-wise, they are getting smaller, and they're returning some baseline back to Japan and Okinawa. But instead, self-defense forces, garrisons, and bases are increasing. And as of 2+2 conference of 2024, the entire Japanese self-defense forces are now under the command of U.S. military. So Japan's Defense Department is completely integrated under the Department of War of the United States. What we've been witnessing across Japan is the new constructions surrounding satellite system related equipment, such as very heavy electric magnetic field towers and so forth. What we've been witnessing over there is also so-called joint use of civilian airport and seaport. They're trying to designate more civilian airports and seaports to expand their facilities. When they talk into local citizens, they bring this matter like this. Oh, if you expand your airport, you can accommodate jumbo jets, which will bring more tourists to your area and your economy will be flourished. That's the introduction. They also expand their seaport, saying the similar thing. Well, when you expand your dock, you can accommodate cruise ships, and then you can have more tourists to your commercial alleys. But once they complete those construction work, what's going to happen? For example, in Kumamoto, they have one of the very, very long runways, more than 3,000 meters. And as soon as they accomplished expansion of a airport facility, guess what? From morning till night, military aircrafts, trains, landing and taking off, nonstop. That's the reality. In case of Ishigaki Island, which is one of those small remote islands of Okinawa, they had beautiful expansion of their seaport. Then constantly 17 Japan's Coast Guard ships are surrounding them. Okay, so in this way, they're trying to expand all across Japan, their civilian airports and seaports, so that they can jointly used with local military facilities. So as you can see what's going on now in Middle East, Middle Eastern countries are saying, oh, because we are hosting U.S. military bases, we are being targeted. So why don't we get rid of the U.S. military bases? That's the new trend of discussion. And I'm hoping that Japan will go that way, but who knows? And I would like to share some statistical numbers with you, which is very important to compare how much militarization is going on over there. The size of Japan, the island chain of Japan's size is almost the same as the state of California, okay? In California, there are 32 military bases, 32. I think Californians think that, oh, that many? That's too many. However, in Japan, there are 120 U.S. military base facilities, okay? On top of that, there are 237 Japan Self-Defense Forces garrisons and bases. And some of the facilities are used jointly together. So it is very difficult to pinpoint exact number, but in the ballpark of 350 military facilities are in Japan, from the northern island of Hokkaido all the way to the off the coast of Okinawa, remote islands. Think about it. And there are 54 commercial reactors, nuclear reactors, okay? If you add research and development purpose of a small size of reactors, there will be altogether 78 nuclear reactors in that island chain, okay? And they're all existing 4 major tectonic plates, moving against each other. So they're prone to earthquake. How dangerous is that? Now they're talking about add 130 more ammunition depots. 130 alone was a surprising number to me, but recently I just found out more scary number. Mainichi Shimbun newspaper company, one of their articles says like this: they are adding 130 ammunition depots to pre-existing 1,400 ammunition depots. Okay, they have 1,400. This is only self-defense forces ammunition depots number. Okay, so I don't know how many U.S. military bases have ammunition depots, but altogether, there are amazing amount of weapons and ammunitions and very dangerous stuff all across Japan. And here's another almost stupidly surprising reality. The majority of people in Japan still believe that they are protected by US military. Too much joke, okay? To me, if you see those numbers put all together on the island chains map, obviously Japan is used as a shield against China and Russia and North Korea by the United States. Okay, if you want to, fight jointly, maybe why don't you relocate 120 U.S. military bases to California and Oregon and Washington State? But it's all in Japan, in those small islands. So please think about it. This is very a dangerous situation. And another bigger picture is like this. I've been thinking based on the stories that I've been heard from my mentors. Ukraine was a showcase for ground forces. Middle East has been showcasing air forces. What's next? Navy and Marine. Where do they go? China. So there are a certain chunk of, upper, higher ranking of military people who want to leave their names in this current wars as heroes, right? So we have to somehow suppress that. And it's about a time for us to say no more war. And let's hope that nothing goes any more expand, but I think we all together, this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us, civilians of all across the world, to get together via Zoom and share our feeling and thoughts and idea. And thank you very much for having me today as one of the people of Japan. I would like to share last year's Peace Speaking Tours report in the chat box, as well as some very, very heart-wrenching letter that I just received from Okinawa a few days ago. So please take a look at them. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. That's been really enlightening. I think when you talked about Japan remilitarizing, that really sort of kind of really reached me, that the Pacific has gone through historically so much war. Countries like Australia and New Zealand have experienced to agree, but the people from within the Pacific itself have had the memories of the two major world wars of the last century still live in people's minds. Not only the memories, but the unexploded devices that are still injuring people throughout Pacific Islands. So you've really sort of brought a lot of information to us as well. It's quite disgusting, the level of, the extent of the military capability that's being developed, not only in Japan, but here in Australia as well, with the American submarine bases being developed in Western Australia, and looking at an East Coast submarine site, the Air Force Base at Tyndall, which I'm very pleased to say there's something good about climate change, because the air base at Tyndall in the Northern Territory has been flooded as a result of the recent heavy rain. I hope they decide that it's just not a good idea to have B-52s based in Australia ready to take off for a war against China. And I think that's the thing that hasn't really come up too much today, is just the remilitarization is largely throughout the Pacific is about planning for a war with China at some stage or other. And I think we need to keep that uppermost in our minds, despite the focus being on the tragic and really dangerous and scary situation in the Middle East and the loss of life there. Rachel, you've got your hand up. Yeah.
Yes, I would like to suggest one thing to one of our audience today. I saw the name Hideko Otake among us. She goes to Okinawa almost every summer and take an enormous amount of video and add English translation to the local people's interviews. And Hideko, if you don't mind, would you please share your YouTube link channel information so that the people can watch your videos and firsthand Okinawans' voices, please? Thank you.
That'd be great. And please save your chat, although any material like the PowerPoint presentations or this potential videos, we can make sure they are shared when we shared the recording of this webinar. So we've had a good number of people attending and people staying on. And right now we're going to hear some of the questions, and I'm going to ask Jay from World Beyond War Asia to ask to the speakers questions that have been put in the chat. Jay.
We have one, Annette. I think this is for Rachel. Fukushima lying in wait. What electricity generation alternatives does Japan have, however?
What kind of electricity?
What electricity generation alternatives does Japan have?
Well, that's a very good question, to be honest with you. When their 54 reactors were fully operating, they were generating only 20% of electricity that they were using in those days. Okay, this is a very interesting comparison with France. The nation of France has 58 reactors, providing 70% of their electricity. Okay, which is significant. In case of Japan, they traditionally had a hydroelectricity generator as well as thermal electricity generators, and they were pretty much enough. They constantly had more than 20% of excess energy all the time, which means they never, ever needed nuclear power plants whatsoever. Okay? And here's another interesting data. Japan is the world fifth largest plutonium stockpile holder. Okay, way more than China, way more than North Korea. Okay, so there's a certain very handful of people among Liberal Democratic Party who still believes that Japan needs to have nuclear weapons. Technically possible, and they do have plutonium, and there are people who are dreaming for it, although the entire rest of the country wants to get rid of nuclear. But anyway, this is the reality. Thank you.
A lot of that plutonium has its origins in Australian uranium that's been exported to Japan. Yeah.
Yes.
Jay, next question.
I think that's about it.
Oh, that's about it?
Questions for David.
Okay. Would anyone who's here like to ask a question of Eugene? We've got Eugene, and I see Suzanne's hand up. Suzanne, would you like to ask a question? I'll just unmute.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I couldn't unmute for a minute. I'd like to ask the panel members and perhaps anybody else here too, what's the best, strongest role PPN can play to give effect to the, to mobilise support, mobilise action against war, against this militarism, and get rid of bases, etc. How can this group best support that?
Who'd like to answer that question from Suzanne?
I will. Get everybody off their butts and get moving. Do whatever you need to do, whether it's go out on the street corner, whether it's to go to your parliament, just organize and get moving. That's the only way we can face all of this. We've got to get get people in action and get them moving. Thank you.
Absolutely. Eugene?
Well, I think sharing, finding interesting ways to share databases. People tend to be quite protective of their databases. That's entirely understandable. But try to figure out clever ways of actually scaling up, getting bigger, because the bad guys and gals, but mainly guys, have got so much power, so much reach, and we need to be far better at reaching more and more people with our messaging.
Very good. That's exactly what we're doing in Hobart today, is working with different groups. There's a demonstration on right now that I wasn't able to go to about the attack on Iran and AUKUS. So thanks, Eugene. I think that's important that we do concentrate our knowledge and data and our people as well. Cora, would you like to say anything?
Well, this is a subject matter yesterday among us from Southeast Asia, and we were saying we have to go beyond saying stop the war, no more war. So it has become like very common that people don't pay attention to it anymore. And I thought that having an experience several days ago with young people doing a radio broadcast, a simulation of a radio broadcast. It was very interesting. It was like a conversation, but it brought out a lot of issues currently that are happening. In fact, we focused on the 15th year anniversary of Fukushima Daiichi tragedy, and in a way have also established the connection between nuclear energy and nuclear weapons production.
Yep.
So in a sense, that was very helpful. But again, also I agree that mobilization is very important. Being creative, I don't know how much more creative we can be, but hopefully, when the issue becomes gut level, as we call it, people feel it, and therefore that makes people do action quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've raised a really good other area of our activism is in the media. Thank you. Sung Hee, would you like to comment?
Yes. Yes, I want to add that we should watch how our economy is becoming militarized. In case of South Korea, the government, central and the local governments are all promoting the arms industry, arms export. For example, the current president Lee Jae-myung is saying he wants South Korea as one of the 3 AI nations, as one of the 4 arms export countries, one of 5 space nations. So, which is very clear that for us that if we want to stop the war, we should watch what's going on in our economy. So the many people are already mentioning about the military industry AI complex, and then we know that this war is actively being used, with AI by the Silicon Valley companies. So we should watch how the AI is applied to the current war, and then how the military war, and that's another task for us. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sung Hee, for introducing that as well. All right, I'm just going to go to the next questioner. Bevan, would you like to ask your question?
No, Annette, I want to make a statement. We're saying, what can we do about all this? Can I draw everyone's attention to the petition, the call on government that the Pacific Peace Network produced last year in conjunction with World Beyond War? This is a very relevant call on our governments, which we need to take out into our communities. It calls for our governments to be neutral in any big power war, to stop preparing for any big power war, and to not let our territory be used in preparation or for such a war. Now, this is very relevant to our countries at the moment, to keep out, to adopt a neutral position against these big power wars. And I do urge that we promote that call again in our communities. Take it out and let's talk about it.
Yeah, very timely, Bevan. And Greta, if you wouldn't mind putting that back in the chat, just the link to the petition. And at our next Pacific Peace Network meeting and at all of your meetings regionally, wherever you are, to raise this, the existence of this petition. It's a way to communicate, but it's also a way to put pressure on the United States allied countries, which I think we're all from those countries in the Pacific. Probably every one of the Pacific countries you can, apart from China, you could say is an ally of the United States. They have a hold on those countries in one way or another. I know that it's really important that we look positively as well to the future and try to imagine, as hard as it is to imagine, the sort of future that we want for our children and grandchildren. I know we've got Phil Smith here. I think it's Phil, isn't it? Who just wanted to mention a project that he's working on. Phil, would you like to unmute and briefly talk about your visionary program? You need to unmute, Phil.
Thanks very much, Annette, and congratulations to the network on getting this webinar happening. And later in the year, I will launch a global competition that links peace and sustainability. At this stage, my target audience is university students. That could change. Simply an announcement now that when I've got the materials together, I would like to distribute it through this network so that you can get it out to the people you know, to join in this Speaking for the Planet competition. The focus will be on peace and sustainability, and it will invite participants to link their personal and their professional lives to achieving both peace and sustainability. Thank you, Annette, for the opportunity to say that. I'll put my email into the chat, but when the materials are ready, I will send them to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Phil. You know, it's easy to get stuck in the moment, and I think we've also always got to be thinking about, well, what are we working towards? What's the future that we want for ourselves, our kids, our grandchildren, and further generations to come? Now, is there any other questions or anyone like to make a further comment? We've got another sort of 10 minutes or so. Rachel?
Yes, I would like to piggyback with what what's her name? I'm sorry, the lady from Philippines and
Cora?
yeah, what the Cora and also Sun Hee Choi said. The regular economy's militarization and also Fukushima 15th anniversary just took place a few days ago. And now government of Japan allocated a huge budget for a so-called Fukushima Coastal Innovation Project or something like that. So they're trying to, under the name of a recovery, they allocated so much budget in order to sustain certain chunk of population, especially younger generations. They seem to be kind of a guinea pig for nuclear ramifications over human body. That's one thing that I would like to share with you. Another thing is that kind of humongous budget is now used for military research and development under the name of recovery of Fukushima. It's very, very grotesque things are going on. And in Nagasaki University, now they're adding one research lab for biochemical research. Nagasaki University is in the middle of a big city, but they'll be dealing level 4 lab, which means they will be dealing with very, very how do you say, dangerous virus over there. So that's one information that I wanted to share with you. And what was the other one? The budget, governmental budget. I told you before that the Fukushima's allocation was geared to more military expenses, although the budget come from different department. And also the expansion of airports and seaports that I mentioned before, that was also coming from different department. So on top of Department of Defense, they have other departments' budget allocated for military purposes. So Japan's real military budget is much bigger than what it says on the government documents. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah.
Agneta, we have your hand is up. Agneta? You need to unmute, Agneta. I believe Agneta is coming to us from it's one of the Scandinavian countries. And you need to unmute, Agneta.
I'm here now. Well, it's a little bit, I'm rather puzzled. I live in Sweden. I'm Agneta Norberg, you know me, some of you. One thing we have to dare to say in these times of war against Iran is Israel. I haven't heard the name of that country during the whole meeting now. Israel is pushing the U.S. ahead, and Trump can't do anything without Netanyahu. They are absolutely good friends. We have to dare, I say dare, because Israel has been sort of sanctuary for different reasons and for the Holocaust and everything. And we have to dare to say that Israel has turned to be one of the most criminal states. Thank you.
Thank you, Agneta.
Yeah.
Yes?
Before we go on, Deborah, there's one question from the chat. Any thoughts on China and others' efforts to establish a multipolar world without imperial wars and regime change ops?
Okay, I'll put that to any of the speakers, but just in case there's any relationship with that question, I think we've got a question from Deborah there.
Actually, it's not a question. I was very pleased to hear Cora mention about being creative about getting your message across. And I just want to mention what we've done in Otautahi Christchurch. We had an art exhibition about war and peace, actually. And it sort of paid for itself because we invited artists to do paintings about a culture of peace. And that if they were sold, they were to give us 25% of the painting. And although a lot of people who came by were actually tourists, I signed up a few people from overseas even for World Beyond War, and we signed up some new people for Christchurch for World Beyond War, and had a lot of interesting discussions. So be creative. Think about a way that you can actually recoup your money. It was Quaker Peace and Service who gave us the money. I'm a Quaker. And if you want to be creative and get people talking, I'm making white peace poppies that I can make at a very, very cheap price as well. Be a bit creative to raise funds, but to be there and talk to people, and they will come over and talk to you. Even if they say something not very nice, I'll be there. So think about being
Good on
creative.
you, Deborah. That's fantastic. Yeah, thank you for that advice. And going back to the question in relation to, I suppose China's kind of where China sits with all this. I'm interested to get some opinion, at least from some of the speakers. Eugene, would you like to comment first?
Sure. And just very quickly, I'd tautoko, I'd support what Agneta said. No disrespect to our dear American friends here, but I think the United States and Israel are two buttocks of the same bum when it comes to these terrible crimes. In respect to China, yeah, I like to just remind people, and I know I don't need to remind you folks, that the United States is not our friend, and America and China is not our enemy. And I have a horror when my government says that we see China as a strategic competitor. I think that's an absolute disaster, and it's worth reminding people that the last time China had even a half-decent war with anybody was in 1979, and it was very brief, and I'm sure you're all aware of that, but it is worth reminding people of those facts. And I have to say, time and again, the Chinese do seem to be behaving like the adults in the room. And I really admire the fact that they constantly reference the UN Charter and international law. And I think we should respect the work they're doing in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping it to the point and brief. Some country that's much closer to China, which is Korea. I'm interested to hear Sung Hee's view on where China sits geopolitically and with what's going on in the Middle East right now. Can you unmute Sung Hee, please?
Thank you for the good question. You know what? The point of the Korean Peninsula is Korea is divided. North Korea, South Korea. And the United States, South Korea is one of the great outposts against the United States. And then if you see the map, you see how close the South Korea is from China, which means South Korea could be easily at the forefront of a U.S. war against China. And that's how South Korea is militarized. The geopolitical situation of South Korea, first, division. Second, outpost against China. It's why the South Korean military industry is growing. South Korea is very small country, as you see in the map. It's about the 108th or 9th ranking in the in terms of the nation country area. However, its military power, war power, is a fifth. Imagine how it is militarized, how it is a war country, how you should watch South Korea, how it sells arms to the countries in the Middle East. So, you know, yeah, that's my point is that, so that's the task of the South Korean peace activists like me, that how we demilitarize, how we make a peaceful unification with North Korea, rather than demonize North Korea, rather than demonize China. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sung Hee.
Thank you.
Very good. We've got a hand up from Laurie. Might just take Laurie's question and then we'll hear from Rachel. You need to unmute, Laurie.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm Laurie Ross of New Zealand Nuclear Free Peacemakers, and we work on many different campaigns, but what I'm getting from today is just a reaffirmation of the bigger picture that it seems we are ready to work on through our Pacific Peace Network, which is for a world beyond war. That we are all talking about the military-industrial complex, military-technological complex, military fossil fuel-dependent complex, which is creating the ecocide as well as the mass murder of civilians in so many different countries. And of course, what we're looking at now is, well, how can we, the majority of humanity, right? We are the majority, the 90 or 99%. How can we overcome the 1% of the 500 multinational corporates and the 1% billionaire class and the politicians that are driving this geopolitical conflict and competition so that we all feel, meaning most people feel, helpless, apathetic, and despair. But we don't. The people in this forum today and in many other forums, we don't give in to this insanity, because that's what it is. So what we're looking at now is what kind of constructive opposition or projects we can engage in. One of them I want to just reaffirm, or three. So one of them is the World Beyond War petition. I think that's great, the neutrality one. And New Zealand, when we were pursuing our nuclear-free zone platform from 1981 to 87, we always had in every petition that New Zealand would withdraw from ANZUS and all nuclear and military alliances and establish a peacemaking neutrality. So it's called positive neutrality, defense and foreign policy. So I think that's a very important position that we could study and promote. And I would just suggest, make submission that we would all be using that in the terms of our own country. So at least every party and every country represented here today would be getting a submission or the petition saying that, or both, because we're looking at a submission to defense and foreign policy ministers that each country would want to employ some form of positive neutrality. Some people like to call it non-alignment, whatever, but it's just the idea that one must have a platform in order to pursue peacemaking, peace building, peace keeping, and peace education and peace culture. You have to have a platform for that. And at the moment, the platform is war making and so on. So my second point is that, okay, what's a good practical goal? One of them that I'm working on this year is the Stop the RIMPAC exercises. So as many of you would know, over 27 countries will be gathering in Hawaii, June, July for the RIMPAC War Games. And so that's, as I say, thousands, 30,000 military all the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So my point being that I want to give you just this one little glimpse. One of the campaigns we're working on right now in Auckland, Tamaki Makarau, is how we're going to have a peace squadron on our Haraki Gulf. You may remember the heady days of the 1970s and 80s when we had peace squadrons out on the water to stop the nuclear warships and submarines coming in. Now we're going to stop our New Zealand Navy from leaving our Devonport Waitemata Harbor. We're going to stop them from leaving to go up to join the RIMPAC warfare exercises. And so our peace squadron on the water will also provide what's always necessary as a media catalyst, because all of our talking and etc. It has to then be crystallized in public action that the media will take some attention. So that's a good one. And I'm just wondering with Australia, I just love the fact that we're all collaborating for a nuclear-free Australia and for the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. I mean, Australia is the kingpin. You're the queen pin. And if Australia could get it together to say, that you're not going to allow Australia, or at least not without a fight, without a resistance, you're going to do peaceful, nonviolent resistance to stop Australia continuing to fund and invest in and promote and profit from the whole military warfare industry. My last point. So this week I'm going up to the Rocket Lab company in Warkworth, which is just north of Auckland. We normally have our big protests out at Rocket Lab in Mount Wellington, which is Auckland. And, because Rocket Lab is making billions from supplying military warfare services. I won't go into the whole story, but just to say that we have that whole front, the space militarization front.
Right, yeah.
So
Thanks very much.
Note, I'll just leave you with all that because there's so much more to say.
We've run out of time, unfortunately, Laurie.
Okay.
And I'm not sure whether can we squeeze in just the last comment from Rachel before we wind up? If you keep it very, very short, Rachel.
I'll try my best to keep it very short. I was thinking of 3 points. First, piggybacking what Song Hee Choi mentioned about stigma, current trend of stigmatizing China, Russia, and North Korea, which is basically it's a work of NED, National Endowment for Democracy. As you might know, this is the astroturfing agency of NGOs. Here, we are all NGOs, regular grassroots NGOs, and you may see some other astroturfing NGOs, means that getting funding from government, right? So we have to be very careful when we make a coalition not to include those astroturfers, right? And this is a kind of extended extension of Operation Mockingbird. If you don't know the word Operation Mockingbird, please run your own research later. Thank you. And the second point is about what Laurie Rose said. The nuclear idea of a nuclear-free zone, this is what Japan need urgently. As an example, I would like to give Republic of Mongol, which has a border. Northern border is Russia, southern border is China. So the Mongol is sandwiched by two big nuclear powers. Then they declared nuclear-free zone as a nation, and which is confirmed by the UN Council. So that means this is an international law. Without possessing any weapons, they made themselves very safe, because whichever the country use, or just passing by with nuclear weapons, they are illegal. Okay, so this is very important for Japan to keep its neutrality, safety, and internationally, binding as Japan's image as a so-called nuclear-free country and a victim of nuclear weapons. And the third point is about TPNW. The TPNW still hold a certain expression, so-called peaceful use of nuclear. This is an oxymoron. Wholeheartedly, I'm against this expression, because as long as they extract uranium, there are a lot of indigenous society being victimized through the transportation and tilling and milling and using as energy, but there's a certain level of really incomplete and very poor concept of nuclear waste management. So
very good point.
Use, no. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you to everyone who has come to this opportunity to listen and to share information. It's been wonderful to have so many different parts of the Pacific represented. I just want to pay particular note, Gordon Walimbu, who we have with us and has spoken at previous Pacific Peace Network webinars. Gordon's from Papua New Guinea, an important part of the region that we're all sharing. So let's keep talking, let's keep listening, let's keep organising and planning how we can put the most pressure that we possibly can on our governments for whichever country that we're in. The power of standing together and building that grassroots unity is what it's all about. So again, thank you all. Please come to the next Pacific PeaceNet webinar, which will probably be anytime in the next month or 2 months. The situation is very volatile. And I also want to thank World Beyond War for working so closely with us in PPN and providing such wonderful facilities to host this webinar. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Greta. And we'll see you all again before too long. And thank you to all the speakers who really were fantastic. Okay, goodbye for now, and we'll see you again soon.
Night. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.